Hey, what's up, Mavs fans? Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me for my latest video and podcast for Inside the Mavs. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video and subscribe to my channel here as well. And if you're listening to the podcast, give it a 5-star rating, write a review for it while you're there, and you can download and subscribe to Inside the Mavs on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts for free. And appreciate you supporting Inside the Mavs, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak. The Mavericks get back on the floor on Sunday afternoon when they take on the Philadelphia 76ers as they begin a 3-game homestand against the Sixers on Sunday. That continues on Tuesday against the Indiana Pacers before they take on the Miami Heat on Thursday. And then they go back on the road to take on the Detroit Pistons and the Chicago Bulls. The Mavericks right now in the midst of playing what is 9 consecutive games against the Eastern Conference. Unfortunately, they went 1-3 on their East Coast road trip where they lost to the Indiana Pacers. They also lost, of course, to the Cleveland Cavaliers before getting a win on the road against the Toronto Raptors before ultimately getting hit with a barrage of 3-pointers by the Boston Celtics in their loss on Friday evening. So the Mavericks, who currently right now are 34-26 in the Western Conference, 8th in the West. Looking at the rest of their schedule, the question that we're going to be discussing today is, are the Mavericks destined for the play-in, or can they get themselves to the top 6 of the West? This is a team that had just won their previous 7 games before going 1-3 on their East Coast road trip, now come home to take on the Philadelphia 76ers on Sunday. And when you look at the Mavericks right now, based on what they have, you look at the rest of their schedule, and they've got several games against opponents where they can maybe make up some ground in the Western Conference. As it stands right now, the Mavericks have 3 games against the Golden State Warriors, who are, of course, 9th in the West, and they have 2 games remaining against the Sacramento Kings. Let's kind of break it down when it comes to their schedule to give you a better picture of what the Mavericks are looking at based on who's in front of them and who's behind them and what they would probably need to do in order to get themselves in the top 6. Based on what we know right now, what we have, the Mavericks, of course, as I mentioned, 8th in the West. They have the 8th easiest schedule for the remainder of the season. Their opponent win percentage is around .478. When you look at the Suns, we'll start there. The Suns, of course, in 5th in the West at 35-24 right now. Remember, the Mavericks own the tiebreaker over the Phoenix Suns. The Suns have the toughest remaining schedule left in the final portion of the season. The Pelicans, who are in 6th right now in the West, right now they're 36-25, holding down the 6th spot right now in the Western Conference. They have the 12th hardest remaining schedule for the rest of the year. The Kings, as we mentioned, the Mavericks having 2 games against Sacramento ahead of them, currently in the West right now in 7th. They are 34-25. Kings right now have the 15th hardest remaining schedule. And then the Golden State Warriors, who are behind the Mavericks by a game and a half in the West at 32-27. They have the 9th easiest remaining schedule when it comes to the rest of their season, So the Mavericks, as we mentioned, they've got games against the Warriors, games against the Kings, opportunities to make up ground with the Kings in front of them, but also keep teams like the Golden State Warriors at bay behind them. The Warriors, who won 3 straight games of their own, 8-2 in their last 10 games, been playing extremely well in the West. And the Mavericks, here's the thing. We saw them really announce themselves, I thought, as a Western Conference contender with that 7-game winning streak that included wins, a 35-point beatdown of the Oklahoma City Thunder, a really nice win against the Phoenix Suns, and a team that we felt was turning the corner. And when you look at the anatomy of that 4-game road trip that they had against the East Coast and the Eastern Conference, I should say, the Mavericks, of course, lost to the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers using a 20-4 run in that 4th quarter after the Mavericks had got it to within 4. Kyrie Irving leading the charge in the comeback. Then they went away from him in that 4th quarter. Pacers run away with it in that 4th and final period. Then you, of course, have the devastating loss on the road to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Max Strus going nuclear on the Mavericks, scoring 15 of his 21 points in that 4th quarter, including that 60-foot heave from half court to win the game in devastating fashion for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Then you go on the road to Toronto. You're able to use a 25-7 run in that third quarter, outscoring the Raptors by 15, 40-25 in that period, and are able to get it done against the Toronto Raptors. Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic continuing to play sensational as a tandem together. And then you face the biggest test of your road trip on the road in Boston, where, look, the Boston Celtics are running through everything in their path. They've got the best record in the NBA at 47-12. They've won a league-high 10 straight games, and they used 21 three-pointers to absolutely hit you with a barrage of threes throughout the course of the game. The Mavericks were able to get it within two twice in that third quarter, but the Celtics, especially with Jason Tatum scoring 16 points in that third quarter, were able to open things back up to get themselves in position to go on to win that game by 28 points. So a disappointing road trip for the Mavericks, where you felt like they could maybe, if they could go 2-2, be able to have some momentum coming back to the American Airlines Center, and that simply was not the case. And now we look at what they have going forward for the rest of the year. Can they get themselves into the top six and be able to secure themselves a spot in the West without having to deal with the play-in? Let's take a quick break here on Inside the Mavs and hear from today's partner of our video and hear from Aura today. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs. Appreciate you hanging out through that break and thanking our sponsor of today's video, Aura, for bringing us that message there. The Mavericks, as we were discussing, trying to get themselves back in the top six of the West. And when you start looking at their schedule and what they'll need to do, they'll continue playing against the Eastern Conference as they continue their next 5 games against the East with a 3-game homestand beginning on Sunday against the Philadelphia 76ers, and they need to get that win. That is a win that you've got to have coming back home to the American Airlines Center to reestablish some momentum that you have built during that 7-game winning streak. And one of the things that we had seen during that 7-game winning streak was how well the defense had been playing for the Dallas Mavericks. And when you look at what they've been doing defensively over their last 4 games, based on what they did on their East Coast road trip, defense slipping a little bit based off of what we saw. You think about it, they gave up the 138 points to the Boston Celtics. I mentioned hitting 21 three-pointers in a game. That will allow you to win a lot of games as well. But let's look at the last 4 games for the Mavericks here. They gave up 133 points to the Indiana Pacers. They gave up a $121 to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Even in the win against the Toronto Raptors, you gave up 125, where you had to score 136 to win that game, with Luka Doncic having the 30-point triple-double that he had. And then, of course, you give up 138 points to the Boston Celtics. So the defense hasn't been there the way that it's needed to be. And for folks who are upset, especially from the Boston game, about how the Mavericks decided to play against the Celtics, because, look, with the Celtics, it's really difficult with them. Starting lineup for them has a bunch of guys that can shoot, between Porzingis, obviously with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, Derek White bombing away from 3 as well. They've got a bunch of dudes in that starting lineup that can knock down shots, and it makes it a lot more difficult to defend them. Jason Kidd saying after the game that they felt like the best idea was for them to go small and it simply didn't work out. People particularly point to that third quarter when Tim Hardaway Jr. was in the game. At the 7:20 mark, the Mavericks were down by 3, and by the time he subbed out, they were down 112-94. I'm not necessarily putting it all on Tim Hardaway. My point is, defensively, they were not good by the time you got to what the game was out of hand in the fourth quarter, as the Mavericks were not able to hold it against the Boston Celtics. So collectively, for a team, the defensive effort hasn't been great, and that was the hallmark of their 7-game winning streak. If you remember, during that 7-game win streak, they were second in the NBA in defensive rating. And part of that was being able to see them be able to get out in transition, getting in the passing lanes, and be able to make things happen from there. And they just simply have not been able to do that over the last 4 games, even in the win that they had against the Toronto Raptors. And again, you'll see the Indiana Pacers on Tuesday. And we know that they can put points together in bunches and be able to really put pressure on you with guys like Miles Turner, Tyrese Halliburton. You know the normal suspects for them and the way that they're able to play in Indiana. Philadelphia, who's had a tough time, obviously trying to figure things out without Joel Embiid. That is a game that you should pencil in as a win. And that's where we get to where the Mavericks are right now. As we mentioned, 34-26, 8th in the West. If, in my mind, they can go 14-8 down the stretch, that would get them basically what they are right now to what would be 48-34 on the season. So that would have you at 14 games above 500. That would get you, I would think, into the top 6, because here's where we are in the West. And this is how crazy things have been in the Western Conference. It may take 49 to 50 wins to secure a top 6 spot in the West. That is how good the West has been so far this year. When you look at what the Oklahoma City Thunder are doing, the Minnesota Timberwolves, the Denver Nuggets really starting to turn it on right now, having won 5 straight games themselves. They are really starting to put the pedal to the metal as they get ready to defend their NBA championship in the playoffs. So you're seeing here how difficult and how treacherous the Western Conference is, and you've got to find ways to get wins. You're looking at their next several games. We already talked about the 3-game homestand that they have with the Sixers, Pacers, and the Miami Heat. Then you go on the road to take on Detroit and Chicago on Monday, March 11th, and then, March 9th, and then March 11th. Those games you got to win. You got to beat Detroit on the road. You got to beat Chicago on the road, because then after that, your next 3 games after you take on Detroit and Chicago, your next 3 games are against the Golden State Warriors, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the aforementioned Denver Nuggets. Obviously, tough games that they will have. They'll complete their 9 straight games against the East, and then they will take on the Warriors, Thunder, and the Denver Nuggets, and then take on the San Antonio Spurs on the road, where, of course, Victor Wembanyama is starting to really come into his own and really play some terrific basketball. So you kind of get my drift here on where the Mavericks are and what they need to do to be able to be in position to secure a top 6 spot in the West. It's going to be difficult. You still got games against Sacramento, as we mentioned earlier. Both of those games are on the road March 26th and on March 29th. Both of those games in Sacramento. So when you look at the Mavericks schedule, the way that they were playing in their previous 7 games, can they get back to the kind of defense that they were playing during that 7-game win streak? Well, obviously continuing to see guys like Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving put it together on the offensive end. They're getting better shooting now from P.J. Washington on the outside, knocking down some 3-pointers. But I'm curious to see how the Mavericks will move forward with Daniel Gafford. You saw what Derek Lively was able to do against the Boston Celtics. My man with a perfect 7 of 7, had 15 points. Derek Lively is playing well and continuing his growth as a rookie, finding out how things continue to work behind him, obviously, with Daniel Gafford, who has come in and played well when he's had the opportunities to do so. That will need to continue going forward down the stretch, because as you look at the composition of the West, the big teams of the West when it comes to Denver, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, obviously the Clippers to a degree as well, teams that are extremely big, and you're going to have to figure out how to keep guys like Daniel Gafford on the floor as he's able to continue to play for this team, because if you don't, you're going to find yourself getting punished by big teams like the way that Boston did. Now, Boston is unique. We talked about it a little bit earlier with their ability to have a bunch of guys with size that can shoot, and not only shoot, but put the ball on the deck, that really made things difficult for the Mavericks. And when you're trading twos with threes, the way that the Mavericks and the Celtics were doing, especially in that third quarter, where, yeah, the Mavericks were extremely efficient in 2-point field goals, going 12 of 16 in 2-point field goals, you saw how the difference was made with the ability for the Celtics to knock down threes and how they were able to take control of the game. The Mavericks will need to get back to their collective defensive effort that we saw during that 7-game win streak to really give you confidence that they can be a team that can get to the top 6. Because if they don't, we're looking at teams like the Lakers, the Warriors, and the Sacramento Kings right there in that play-in situation. If the season were to end today, you're taking on Sacramento in that play-in and then having to deal with either the Lakers or the Warriors potentially, depending on how things fall and where you fit in those playoff games, to have to get through LeBron James and Stephen Curry potentially as well just to get in. So you see the difficulty here on how things look based on the way things are down the stretch. And for the Mavericks, that is not where you want to be as far as the Western Conference is concerned. Get yourself in the top 6, avoid the play-in, and then feel good about what you could potentially do in a first-round matchup based on who you may be matched up with. But right now, it feels like that 7-game winning streak was a distant memory. And you say, Kevin, now hold on. The Mavericks were just on that 7-game win streak not that long ago, and this is part of the ebbs and flows of an NBA season. You're going to have some really nice win streaks. You're going to have some really nice highs, but you're also going to be dealing with some lows as well. And the peaks and the valleys that the Mavericks have gone through this year, they're going a little bit through those valleys right now when it comes to what they did in their 4-game road trip. But they have a chance to get things back together when they take on the Sixers on Sunday afternoon. And they'll need to, because if you drop that game against Philadelphia on Sunday, now you're welcoming in the Indiana Pacers and the Miami Heat as well. 2 very difficult games against those 2 teams before you go on the road where you should handle business against Detroit and Chicago, and then dealing with the Warriors, the Thunder, and the Nuggets. Not an easy stretch here for the Mavericks based on their schedule, even though they have the 8th easiest schedule for the remainder of the season. This stretch of games is going to be critical in the way that we view them going forward for the rest of the year, and the way that I will view them based on their ability to possibly contend and make a little bit of a run in the Western Conference playoffs. Because just a couple of weeks ago, I felt really good about the way that the Mavericks were playing based on the habits and the way that they were playing against these teams. They were defending, they were scoring, they were getting, obviously, the acclamation of P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford, putting those guys within these lineups as well. And you were seeing that Tim Hardaway Jr. working through some of his struggles to start to contribute once again to the Mavericks. All of these things have been ebbing and flowing throughout the course of the year, and we're hitting another portion of that when it comes to their schedule. But we're now through 60 games. There are 22 games left for the Mavericks. I think 14-8 can get you into the top 6 of the West. I would be a lot safer if you finish like 15-7 to get yourself closer to that 49-50 win mark. Because if you can, not only does that bring you into focus for the top 6, but that also continues to solidify Luka Doncic's MVP candidacy as well. And if they can have that magical stretch where they can go a 15-7, maybe a 16-6 to really get you into the playoff situation there, now we're talking about something completely different about the way that the Mavericks can be able to handle themselves. But that's what I'm looking for, between 14 and 16 wins to get you into that 48-50 win mark. I think that will get it done to get you into the top 6 of the West and out of that treacherous play-in where you're not having to deal possibly with Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Stephen Curry, the offensive talent that the Sacramento Kings present with Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. You've watched the West. I've watched the West. We know how difficult it's been to find yourself gaining momentum. And that's, I'm sure, for Mavericks fans, it's a little bit of the disappointing part is you had the 7-game win streak and you really didn't make up any ground, because not only how good the West is, but you weren't able to really capitalize on your 4-game East Coast road trip, and you go to just 1-3 during that trip. And now you've got to find yourself making up some of that ground with these next 3 games at home against the Sixers, the Pacers, and the Miami Heat. We will see if they can do so based off of what they have. They're fully healthy, and that's the big thing right now, is that they are fully healthy. I think the number was they had their full team healthy for the first time in 119 days, where the entire team was healthy and available to play. That is the same case going now forward for this homestand, this 3-game homestand. Everyone is good to go. Luka's back. Obviously, Kyrie, Derek Lively, Maxi's back. Dante Exum is now back as well. Good to have him back as another ball handler for this team. They are now fully formed and healthy, and that's the one thing I've been discussing on this show here on Inside the Mavs. What will this team look like when they are fully formed and fully healthy moving forward? We've now got 22 games to figure that out for this team and what they can do to be able to gel and develop the chemistry and continuity needed to make a run here to get into the top 6 and secure themselves a playoff spot without having to deal with the plan. That's my overarching thought for today's show. 22 games left, fully formed, fully healthy. Rotations now need to get solidified, and go make a run at this thing and see what you can do over the final 22 games of the season and really put yourself in position to be thought about potentially as one of the real Western Conference contenders based on what you're able to do. And the schedule allows you to do that now going forward for the rest of the year. Mavericks have their work cut out for them, and we'll see if they're up to the task beginning on Sunday against the Philadelphia 76ers. That's it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Again, appreciate you joining me here, whether you were listening to the podcast on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or if you are watching this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports. Make sure you like and comment on the video as well. Let me know how you're feeling about the final 22 games of the Mavericks season as they get ready for the 3-game homestand before they go back on the road for another couple more games against the Eastern Conference. You can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports, and you can also check me out on 97.1 The Freak on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network as your Mavericks pre- and post-game host for all Mavericks radio broadcasts. My name is Kevin Gray, host of Inside the Mavs. I'll talk to you later. Peace.